Welcome, everybody, to the Talkback for Matter of Mind, My Parkinson's. My name's Karen Sachs, and with me today I have Dr. Tarik Slaoui, who comes to us from Montreal. He has a long background in neurology. I have also Peter Dunlap-Shohl, who you saw in the movie. He's with us from Anchorage, Alaska today. Laura Green is the West Coast producer-director of this film. And you probably saw her at the beginning doing the introduction to it. And she's with us from San Francisco. Here in Bergen County, we have Trudy Heerema, who is a clinical social worker, and more importantly for our purposes, since 2006, she's been a facilitator of Parkinson's support groups. So I am normally your behind the scenes producer on these talkbacks. And this time I'm moderating partly because I am a participant in a global project on Parkinson's disease through the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's Research. I'd like to start with Peter today. We heard you say, "I'll be fine" as the film ends. So question for you is, how are you doing?
I'm doing fairly well. I think that I'm obviously got some difficulty speaking and I have some difficulty walking, but it's stuff that I can manage.
You had the DBS implant towards the end of the film, and it seemed to make a big difference right away.
Well, I had DBS many years before the film, actually. It was 2006, I think, when I had a DBS. And it's continued to make a substantial benefit for my case. I'm increased my medications since. It's been very stable.
That's phenomenal. Laura, you followed the three people in the film pretty closely, and it seemed like during the pandemic, based on all the masks we saw. How long were you with everybody?
So Peter actually, we filmed with the longest because we started filming with him way back in 2018 in the development phase of the film. And then we filmed with the other subjects in 2022, and then one all the way into early 2023. So it was a pretty long slice, especially with Peter.
Wow. Can you tell us how Juan and Veronica are doing now?
Yeah, they're both doing really well. We've seen them recently for some festival screenings in San Francisco and New York, so that's been fantastic. Veronica actually ended up deciding to get deep brain stimulation after the end of filming with her, and she's been doing really fantastic since that change. During the end of the film, she was planning to become a life coach, but now she's been able to continue the boxing, actually, although she had a long recovery afterwards, I think, after the surgery. And yeah, Juan, he's just nonstop at his glasses shop, and he and Lily are doing great.
So the DBS clearly makes a huge impact. Tarik, can you tell us a little bit about how it works?
So you mean the surgery itself or the selection of the patients?
No, the DBS itself.
So it's a device that goes deep inside the brain. Usually when you put the device, you put it on both sides. I know that for certain patients who have symptoms mostly on one side, they can operate only one side, but usually it's implanted on both sides. And you have like a pacemaker that you have on the skin, and it's connected. Usually they do not connect it at the same time. So you do the surgery first, and usually after a few days, you connect the DBS with the pacemaker, and you're able with the pacemaker to make the changes with the frequency and the intensity of the stimulation on each side. And the surgery takes around 3 to 4 hours per half brain. So the whole surgery, if you do both at the same time, take 8 to 10 hours. It's a long surgery. It's a very difficult process for the patients.
So, the research project that I'm in is based out of Indiana University, and it's all over the world, as I said. And I go to Emory in Atlanta, and they have a 1-year waiting list or 1-year plus waiting list for people who want to get DBS. Is it like that in other places?
You know, there are different parts because the first part of the process is to select the patients because not all the patients are good candidates for DBS. But then after the patients have been selected, I think it's roughly the same everywhere because, you know, they're able to operate 1 to 2 patients per week. So depending the number of patients and the number of centers in the city, I think 1 year is probably the average for the waiting list.
Trudy, you said it was actually better in this area, right?
I think it depends on, we don't have that many movement disorder specialists in Northern New Jersey. And so I think there's just not as many candidates for it.
Yeah. So while I'm talking to you, the film makes it very clear that it's so difficult for the entire family live with Parkinson's. And I guess this is where you come in. Can you explain a little bit about what you do and how you support how people support each other and what your role is?
Our support group in Northern Bergen County has 2 groups within the area. One is for people with Parkinson's and the other is for caregivers. So both the person with Parkinson's and the caregiver, it's really essential that they both get support. So with our group, we meet on the first Thursday of the month and we separate after they get there. The husband or the wife, whoever has Parkinson's, stays with me, and then the caregivers go into another room. And I think that they find that it's very helpful to be just with people who are like them. On the 3rd Thursday of the month, we meet again and we usually discuss a topic. We have a speaker and then we're together. I think it's very, very important for people with Parkinson's to be in the room alone and be able to really be honest with each other. I also think that it's so important for people with Parkinson's to know they're not alone, that they're not alone in the boat, is what we usually say in the group. They just need to know there's other people that are going through the same thing that they are, even though Parkinson's, the symptoms and can be very, very different, and the things that really bother or are exacerbated in certain people. I mean, I see with Peter, you know, it's his voice. That's not necessarily 100% universal. Some people, it's their voice is okay. Some people, they freeze more. Some people have more trouble with the tremor. Some people don't have a tremor. But just to be in the room with other people with Parkinson's it's just, the support is amazing. It really is.
I wanted to ask you this later, but I'm going to ask it now. Since we do have viewers and participants from all over the country and Canada, how does somebody find a Parkinson's support group?
Generally on the internet. The Parkinson's Foundation, they list on the internet support groups that are in all the different states. Michael J. Fox has a great website too that that they have information on. That's how people find us, is through the Parkinson's Foundation. And that's how you can find a doctor that way. But yes, and we do Zoom in our meetings so that if somebody leaves our area, they can still attend our group through Zoom.
Thank you. Thank you. Peter, you left Alaska at one point for better medical treatment and specialists in the state of Washington, but you're in Alaska now. So I guess you're finding support both places, or?
Yeah, I go to Washington because they have no movement disorder docs here in Anchorage. So we have neurologists, but not specialists. And it can make a big difference in your treatment. For instance, I had this problem where I was falling, and my movement disorder doc in Seattle suggested that I space out my dosages and that would help with the falling. And it did. It was like magic. And I told that to my neurologist here in Anchorage, and he was sort of stunned by that and said that I guess that's the value of doing one thing. And that was just an example of what can seem like a small thing, but there's a big difference between falling and not falling, which falling can have big consequences.
That's a big deal. Yeah. I wanted to show off your book if I could,
No,
because people who are, let's see, people who are watching this or people who watch the film and participate in the questionnaire that you're going to get afterwards have a chance to enter a drawing for this book, which is not just available here, but pretty much everywhere. Can you tell us a little bit about this book?
well, it was a project that I took up for a number of reasons. One was just sort of to see if I could do it. The second was that I wanted people to have something that was hopeful, which I wasn't able to find anything very much. When I first was diagnosed, I just burned up the web looking for stuff about Parkinson's, and all I could find was really sad blogs about how people were driving a mess and how it was expensive and they were losing their spouses and stuff. And I just had this overwhelming urge to tell a story that was different than that. So this is a fairly hopeful book, despite the title, which is, I suppose, intimidating as some. And it follows my path from being suicidal to being sort of battered but unbowed at the end.
Oh, great. Is the illustration on the right, is that from your book or is that a separate cartoon?
That's a separate cartoon. That's
okay. Because I do want to talk about that with and I guess everybody in this discussion has seen the Parkinsonian face, which you described. And I guess I want to start with Laura, because what do you think?
What do I think? I mean, I think it like so many of Peter's drawings, it says so much, so simply. And you know, Peter has an amazing deadpan sense of humor, which I think is furthered by his Parkinsonian face, because it takes an extra minute sometimes to detect the jokes. And I think that it's something that was interesting and had a learning curve for me as a filmmaker, you know, to realize that affect wasn't always mirroring what was going on for people, you know. And so I think that's it's something, you know, that's true. And then also, you know, we tried really hard in terms of the over medication to sort of get at this complicated thing that Dr. Slaoui, if I hope I'm not mispronouncing, can speak to better, which is the fine line, you know, between not enough medication and too much medication, which is changes as people progress, you know. And so I think in terms of what Peter was saying. So Peter, I hope that I'm not doing a disservice to your drawing, but those are two things I see in it.
That's fine, I think.
So I am going to ask Dr. Slaoui, Tarik, if you can address that also.
So yes, so usually when Parkinson's disease starts, you don't have to take so much medication. So you take medications every 6 hours, and usually patients are fine. But with time, with the progression of the disease, you have to increase the dose. So the patients start to take more and more medication. And with the degeneration of the cells, the medications that you do take to help you for Parkinson can induce movements that are the shakings, the extreme shaking. And that's why it's become, at a certain time, it's very complicated to treat the patients, because on one side, you want to increase the dose of medications to relieve some symptoms, but some side effects on medication make you decrease the dose of medication. So that's when, it's a good timing for DBS.
Okay, I'm going to go back because we still have this graphic on in the middle of the screen, just because I liked it so much when Peter responded to our email about the scheduling this discussion. This was at the bottom of the email, and it took me a few minutes to look at it and figure out, but that's, you know, if you, I don't know if you're still cartooning by hand as much. I saw on the computer, but this is just an amazing thing. And I just wanted to say that.
Oh, thank you.
And I know Laura had said something about it as well.
Oh, I just said that's in Peter's email signature as well. And it's just, I don't know, Peter, I find you to be sort of like wildly creative. Like you're always making something. And when we went to visit Peter's house, you can kind of see there's all this incredible art in the background. And so, you know, my email signature is extremely boring. But of course, Peter's has a self-portrait, you know, made out of punctuation marks. So.
Awesome. I'm going to switch over to some of the medical aspects of Parkinson's for a couple of minutes. And Tarik, I was wondering, we talked earlier about there's a lot of different symptoms. And the question is, it makes it hard to diagnose. I want to say my father had Parkinson's also. And one of the original symptoms that he had, and nobody knew it was a symptom at the time, was that he lost his sense of smell. And that was many years ago. So how do you recognize it? And what symptoms do you look for when you're diagnosing Parkinson's?
So usually the patients, they come to the neurologist and to the doctor when they have motor symptoms. So it could be tremor, it could be bradykinesia, it could be spasticity. So usually they feel weak, they feel slow, they can have tremor, but like you said, 30% of the patients, they won't have tremor. So in the spirit of the people, they think that tremor is associated with Parkinson when it's not, because the majority of tremor are not Parkinson induced, and 30% of Parkinson patients, they will never have tremor. So usually the patients will complain of some slowness of the motion, some rigidity, some pain. And since Parkinson tends to be asymmetric at the beginning, they tend to have symptoms on one side only. So they do consult for these symptoms. And when you make the physical examination, you can see the rigidity and the slowness of motion and sometimes the tremor. But these are the motor signs of Parkinson. But there are also non-motor signs that can be hard to detect because they can lose the smell, they have problem with the voice, sometimes problem with the balance, problem with the sphincters. So these symptoms are harder to diagnose. But most of the time, the patients or the family bring the patients for the motor signs that I gave you.
So Peter, I noticed that over the course of the film, your voice got softer, but now I think did it come back with the DBS?
Well, the voice is actually not as good with the DBS. In my case, it's the placement of my electrode is my line is real close to the speech center, and it has a slight effect on it. But that is part of the trade-off which I've made, and it is worth it to me, although it's tremendously frustrating to not be able to speak clearly. It's really hard to communicate sometimes, and that is isolating and frightening.
When they adjust, how often do you go on to have it adjusted?
I go about twice a year, and they don't always adjust it, but it's we've been experimenting lately with different settings because I have this new doc now, and she is very confident at this. So I've been doing more adjusting lately than I have for a while, and it's sort of frustrating because sometimes it could make it worse, and that is a sort of thing you have to deal with.
But it seems that when they make an adjustment based on what we saw, it adjusts immediately.
Well, it adjusts over time. It seems that some people do have immediate reactions to the adjustment, and some people seem to have longer response times.
And I'm also happy to talk a little bit about Juan's trajectory with DBS in the film as well, if you'd like.
Please, yeah.
Yeah, so when Juan, so going through the DBS, I think that the adjustments are a little more frequent at the beginning because they're really trying to find the right thing. And the other thing that I don't know how this works in your case, Peter, but is that when the DBS starts, it, like when we were in the appointment, it was really like magical, the tremor starts. But then over the coming weeks, there's they have to sort of figure out how to balance medication and DBS because
Yes.
there's some sort of overlap between the two. And so there is, there is this magical moment, but getting it to a really stable place seemed to take a lot of iterating and trial and error was sort of my perspective, seeing it from the outside with Juan's DBS, which was so cool to see live and in person. Yeah, sorry, Peter, go ahead.
It takes about a year to get that thing really figured out to where it's optimized for various people. And
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate that. Trudy, I want to take a step back, and it goes to I think it's towards the beginning of the film or one of the first times we saw Peter, and you mentioned it also in this discussion that you were talking about suicide when you first got your diagnosis. And I would imagine, Trudy, that that's something that you encounter enough.
Occasionally, that someone is having a very deep reaction to their diagnosis. I think of 2 words, and one is disbelief when they get the diagnosis, and the other is loss. They just suffer so many losses, not only physically, but like sometimes I thought of Peter of occupation because he thought he might not be able to work again. So yes, I think there is that thought of suicide. But I do find that when we are in our support group and people are honest, when other people rally around them and give them hope, and I felt like Peter gave hope, I felt like Juan gave hope during the film, that, what, this is worth living. And I find that in the support group that I have not felt that we couldn't support somebody through that.
I've spoken to friends who are in a caregiving situation with somebody with Parkinson's and things like this. And while they know support groups are out there, they're not always, they say, I don't have time for this. I'm too busy taking care of somebody. Is there a solution? I just feel like having support out there is really important.
Is that we find that if we can just get someone in the room and they realize, oh my, you're going through that too, and you share this with me and I can be honest, it makes a difference in their ability to carve out the time, and they'll make that time then.
there's a big, sorry.
I was just coming to you, so go ahead.
There's another big benefit, not just of support, but you can see people that are doing well. And that is one of the things that was a great comfort to me when I was first diagnosed. Was I went to a support group, and I went with the idea that it would be scary and that there'd be lots of people with Parkinson's there that were sort of decrepit and not doing well. And I was surprised to see a lot of people that were coping very well. And that was extremely heartening to me. So that's just what the value of being in a group is.
Peter, I think that's a really important point, is that sometimes when you are looking at going to a support group, you're afraid you're going to see something that you don't see. But when you see people who are living it and they're working hard at exercise and other things that are slowing the progression, all of that knowledge is really power. It's very powerful.
I'm gonna deviate, take off for a second, because I do want to talk about the research that's going on. The study that I'm involved in, they do a bunch of tests on you. You have the cognitive tests, you have brain imaging and brain MRI, and there's they take spinal fluid, and they did a neck biopsy. And apparently the neck biopsy is what gave them a breakthrough that they came out a few weeks ago, a couple months ago, maybe. They called a major breakthrough in a biomarker for Parkinson's. Tarik, are you familiar with this? It was a protein.
Do you have the name of the protein? It's something that was done with patients who had surgery or with
No,
diagnosis
it's
of
on.
Parkinson?
Yeah, they found a protein that will indicates a biomarker for Parkinson's, and what I'm going to quote them. So it's with the promise of a future where every person living with Parkinson's can expect improved care and treatments, and newly diagnosed individuals may never advance to full-blown symptoms. I can't remember the name of the protein in there. But the idea being that the more people who participate in the research, the better. And right now, there's about 2,000. So I wanted to just, in case anybody's interested, they tell me all the time, you can stop anytime. And it usually starts with a smell test. But let's see. So it's PPMI, the Parkinson's Progressive. See it. You can see that on this progression markers initiative. So they want 4,500 people, and these are some of the criteria. I think almost everybody has to be 60 or over.
And not treated.
Hmm?
The patients have to be not treated, so it's the real beginning, it's the onset of the disease.
Yeah, but you don't have to have Parkinson's. So I do not have Parkinson's, and I don't have a Parkinson's gene. But
Okay.
because my father had Parkinson's, I'm participating in the study. So I got the smell test, and it went on from there. Okay. And they ask you questions. You fill out a questionnaire a couple of times a year. Do you act out your dreams? And they do have stuff for 18 and over. So. Mm-hmm. So there, it's different. For the smell test, they want you to be 60. But if anybody wants to join in this and is interested in just helping the research, it doesn't cost anybody anything. And it's the michaeljfox.org, PPMI, and I will take that down and stop my commercial and come back and talk to all of you. So, and Laura, I have another question for you. So you've done 2 parts of a 3-part series. You've done my ALS and my Parkinson's. What's next?
My Alzheimer's is the other part, and we've done a lot of the filming for that, but still have editing and a fair amount of work to get the film together.
And when is that one coming out?
That one will be coming out in the following year. And so it's 1 film a year for 3 years, which I know sounds very slow to people, but it's actually pretty fast for documentaries. But yeah, we don't have the air date yet.
But you're spending a lot of time with people. It takes a lot of time to make these.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's part of our part of what we're really interested in as filmmakers, and a number of people, watching this sort of comment on the feeling of intimacy and of really getting to know people, and that's something that I think takes a certain amount of time. And also neurodegenerative diseases, they're progressive. And so also looking with people longitudinally, I mean, Peter has been living with Parkinson's for over 20 years, which is, I mean, it's mind-blowing in a number of ways, Peter. But, that's, so even though our scale is long, I think it could be even longer given how these illnesses sort of progress and change, and people change over time.
Thank you. So I'm going to just sort of go around for some quick closing thoughts. And Tarik, how optimistic are you or not about what's next for Parkinson's?
I think research is, I think there are a lot of things that can be done with Parkinson. And as somebody said, the knowledge is very important. So the more you know about the disease, the more able we're going to be to treat it. And I think now with the social medias, with everything is connected worldly. So when something is found at the rest of the world, everybody's aware of. But I do have a lot of hope for Parkinson and Parkinson patients. I do have.
Trudy, you want to remind people of how they can find help, find support?
Yes, look on the internet, and all you have to do is Google Parkinson support groups and it'll probably come up. It's just a really, really important thing for people to know they're supported.
I want to say we actually found you that way. And I learned along the way that there are Parkinson support groups pretty much in every state and all over. So, and if you're going on Zoom, then I think that's also a great thing. So thank you. And Peter, you had some really good closing thoughts at the end of the film. So I want to ask you if you have any now.
Well, I think the Parkinson's landscape has changed tremendously, even in the 20 years that I've had, 25 years. And the difference is that the first time we have things as a patient, well, things you can do as a patient that you couldn't before, which is exercise. And that is one of the biggest factors in the new Parkinson's landscape, is that you have the leverage now as an individual to do something that you couldn't do before. You could take a pill, but you didn't have a means of slowing the disease down. And it looks like exercise is that. And so this, the most important thing I think I could tell a person with Parkinson's is, you have Parkinson's now, you have a way you can deal with it.
Thank you so much, all of you, Tarik, Peter, Trudy, Laura. Thank you so much for joining us. I have a commercial for the film, which, by the way, is wonderful. It's a wonderful film, and I hope everybody gets a chance to see it. It's premiering. My Matter of Mind, My Parkinson's is what it's called. It's premiering on PBS stations all over the country Monday, April 8th. Usually at 10 o'clock on Channel 13 here in New York at 10 o'clock. And then on some of the other stations, different times, you can see all over the place on WLIW World here. So check your local listings. And if you miss it, it'll be available on demand as well. What you've seen with us is a slightly shorter version of the full thing. And it's a wonderful, wonderful film. I also want to let people know that there is a Parkinson's walk coming up in New York City if you're in this area on Saturday, April 27th in Central Park. And you can also register for that through the Michael J. Fox Foundation. And if you're those of you watching us now, don't shut down your computers or turn anything off, because TIFF Executive Director Jeremy Lentz is coming up next with an interview with somebody you saw just a short time ago on the NJ21 series. So thank you everybody for joining us. And I look forward to seeing everybody on the films. Thank you.